3 days before Christmas, the call came. I'd just walked through the front door of my apartment after a grueling 12-hour shift at the hospital. My feet ached, my shoulders felt like they carried the weight of every life I'd tried to save that day, and yet, my heart was full. I spotted the suitcase by the door, a soft, forest green sweater folded neatly on top, the perfect balance of festive and unassuming. Inside were gifts carefully chosen for each member of my family, and a bag of rosemary for the stuffing. They'd begged for it for years, never once acknowledging that I was the one who made the stuffing magical. I set my bag down and sank onto the couch, closing my eyes for just a moment of relief. My phone buzzed. Blake. I assumed he was checking on details, like who would drive us to Grandma's or whether Aunt Lou needed extra napkins. But when I answered, his voice was tentative. "Hey. Savannah's coming to Christmas, right?" he asked, his tone too careful. "She's really sensitive about vibes. And with your work, sometimes the energy can feel heavy. You know? So it might be better if you sat this one out." "Nothing personal." I blinked. Heavy. My career, caring for elderly patients, comforting families, guiding people through their final days, was heavy? My stomach twisted. I didn't argue. I simply heard him out. When my mother called an hour later, her voice was gentle, almost sing-song, but beneath it I heard steel. "Honey, we're just trying to make things easy for everyone," she said. "You know how delicate Savannah is. It could cause confusion. Honestly, we might not even answer the door if you show up." The moment passed into stillness. I didn't cry, didn't shout. I whispered, "Okay," and hung up. Then, silently, I opened my banking app. I canceled the mortgage payment. I froze my car loan top-up. I diverted all savings into an emergency fund. I decided, in that instance, I would no longer be the silent backbone holding every piece together. For the first time, I felt free in my silence. I had always thought my family's behavior was normal. As the eldest child, I'd been their trial run, as Dad used to joke, right before slipping Blake the bigger slice of cake. Blake, the golden boy, effortlessly creative, endlessly charming, the miracle baby after years of trying. Me? The reliable firstborn who knew math before kindergarten, who carried the weight of expectations with unwavering determination. When Blake was 6, he turned our living room walls into a canvas of wild drawings. My parents called it expressive. When I broke a bowl helping set the table, I was careless and told to pay more attention. When Blake brought home a participation ribbon, it stayed on the fridge for a week. When I earned straight A's, the paper vanished into a drawer. Once, I left my perfect grade point average report on the kitchen counter in hopes of praise. It never came. And yet, I pressed on. I graduated early. I inhaled textbooks on sleep-deprived nights and earned my medical license faster than most. I became a geriatric doctor because I believed every life, no matter how frail or forgotten, deserved dignity, compassion, and respect. At the hospital, I held trembling hands, offered gentle words, and bore witness to stories that few wanted to hear. That Christmas, as I packed the last of my things into a duffel bag, extra blankets, holiday cookies I'd baked in my tiny kitchen, a Christmas tree ornament for Grandma, I felt a sorrow I hadn't anticipated. Not because I was excluded, but because I realized how long I had allowed myself to be invisible. How I'd let their indifference become the measure of my worth. Outside, the sky was a bruise of icy violet, and the wind quailed around me like a warning. Yet, something in me shifted. I refused to accept that I was too heavy to sit beside a glowing tree, to laugh at Dad's corny jokes, to pass the rosemary stuffing I had so lovingly prepared. That afternoon, I drove away from the house I had called home for 30 years and toward a place I had never dared to imagine, a rented cabin by a frozen lake, halfway between my apartment and my family's town. It was small, with a single room, a fireplace, and windows that framed the pines dusted with snow. I unloaded my bags, lit a fire, and arranged the gifts on a simple wooden table. The forest green sweater, so carefully chosen, lay across the back of the only chair. I cooked the stuffing in a well-worn cast-iron skillet, the rosemary scent mingling with the pine needle air that seeped through the cracks in the window. I made extra, because giving is the only way I know to fight back against being unseen. I wrapped the skillet in foil, tucked it in my duffel along with the cookies, and slid my keys into my pocket. When the world felt too cold, I reminded myself, sometimes family isn't just the people related to by blood. And sometimes, you have to leave the places that hurt you to find the warmth you deserve. So I set out into the snow, one determined step at a time, toward strangers who might need comfort, toward friends who had become family, toward a new kind of Christmas, one where I controlled the light. 3 days before Christmas, the silence in my bank app felt like thunder. I remembered the morning Blake called, his voice tremulous. His big freelance assignment had fallen through, and he needed money. Without hesitation, I wired him what he asked, no questions, no expectations of repayment. To my family, though, Blake was always the shining star, I was merely the reliable one who showed up on time and never complained, until I finally did. There's a peculiar pain in being the person everyone counts on but nobody truly sees. I was the fixer, the helper, the invisible safety net beneath every family emergency. I quietly covered the cost of their broken water heater last February, spotted the overdraft on Mom and Dad's joint account before they even noticed, and booked Blake's Thanksgiving flight when he'd spent his savings on camera equipment. Every text, every call for help, I answered. Co-pays for Mom's physical therapy? Paid. Blake stranded on the roadside for the 3rd time? New car battery arrived within days. I never said no. I told myself it was love, maybe obligation, perhaps just habit. But the night I was told to stay away from Christmas, I saw the pattern. My contributions went unnoticed until they ceased, while every discomfort they felt without me was magnified. When I was there, my quiet seriousness was labeled too intense. When I was gone, life became lighter, easier, more fun. Love or habit, my help only mattered when it was convenient for them. So I opened my banking app and paused every recurring transfer. The $800 monthly toward their mortgage, gone. The rainy day fund I'd built for family crises, locked. The $1,200 Blake still owed me. I knew it might never return, but I refused to let another penny of mine vanish into thankless hands. This was the invisible support they'd taken for granted. Now, its absence would speak louder than any argument. I didn't announce my decision. No social media post. No prolonged silence or cryptic quote. I simply let the quiet settle around me, and with it came the strange comfort of reclaiming my own life. On Christmas morning, I sat alone in my apartment, sipping hot tea from my favorite mug, wrapped in the blanket that smelled faintly of rosemary and fresh laundry. The tree stood unlit in the corner, gifts I'd once wrapped resting untouched on the coffee table. I didn't cry. I didn't light the tree. I barely moved. In that stillness, I felt peace for the first time in years. The next day, my phone buzzed 3 times. First, a missed call from my mother. Then a text, "You've done enough damage already." My heart sank. Finally, a call from Aunt Claire, Dad's sister, the one who still sent birthday cards with handwritten notes. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. "They're saying you ruined Christmas, but you weren't even there." "Ruined it?" I echoed, voice hollow. "Yes," she sighed. "There was an argument with Savannah, Blake's girlfriend. She saw an old photo of you in the living room, recognized you as Dr. Lauren Ellis, the woman who saved her grandmother. She stormed out early, upset. Blake blamed you for the mood shift." My chest tightened. My years of quiet devotion, reduced to a scapegoat for someone else's discomfort. That evening, Aunt Claire called again. She'd learned more. Savannah had mistaken my absence for rejection, believed my work made me incapable of warmth. In trying to protect her sensitive soul, my family had severed ties with the one person who truly understood care. I closed my eyes, vision blurring with unshed tears. But beneath the ache, something new blossomed, clarity. I was not their ghost, I was a lifesaver, a comforter, a keeper of dignity. My value wasn't conditional on their convenience. I thanked Aunt Claire for reaching out and, for the first time, heard her gratitude unfiltered by family politics. Tomorrow, I would return to my patients, people who saw me, truly saw me, every day. They needed me. I needed them. That night, I lay in bed, the silence no longer heavy but hopeful. Somewhere beyond my apartment window, snow drifted silently onto rooftops. And for the first time, I looked forward to a new beginning, one where I was both seen and free. The world outside was completely still when Savannah paused at the doorway, the final echoes of laughter and clinking glasses fading behind her. She turned to me, eyes wide and earnest, and asked in a whisper, "Are you the sister they kept talking about?" I nodded, my heart hammering. What she learned next need not be spoken. Her face closed like a book, and she gathered her coat, purse, and dignity in equal measure before slipping into the night. I don't know the exact words they used, but I can imagine it all too clearly, the casual jokes about my hospital shifts, the barbed comments about my seriousness, the cruel quip Blake once slung, "Lauren is basically death in a pantsuit." Those words stung then, but hearing them through Savannah's ears was a new kind of pain. She hadn't grown up believing family cruelty was normal. She didn't need an invitation to see me for the compassionate doctor I was, the one who refused to give up on her grandmother when everyone else had walked away. And so, by not showing up, I shattered their comfortable illusion. I ruined Christmas by simply existing outside their narrow story. 2 days passed. I thought perhaps the world had moved on. Then my phone buzzed with an incoming call from my mother. No greeting, just the sharp rush of words. "I don't know what you said to her, but Blake's a wreck." Savannah blocked his number. "She's posting online about being treated like garbage by the family of someone she admires." I could almost hear her pacing, nervously pouring wine as she spoke. "She tagged your photo," my mother continued, voice tight. "She said you deserve better than polite smiles that hide cruelty. Now Blake's being blacklisted in her art circles in New York. His future's on the line." I almost laughed, at the absurdity of it all. After years of making me invisible, they suddenly cared about the consequences of my absence, as if my silence had become their worst PR nightmare. My mother pleaded, "Please, reach out to her. Clarify everything." As if I were their family's press secretary, called in to smooth over the fallout of their own neglect. I didn't promise. I simply whispered, "I'll think about it," and let the line go silent. That evening, curiosity drew me to Savannah's post. It wasn't loud or bitter, it was gentle and true. "I will never forget the doctor who saved my grandmother's life." I walked into a family celebration expecting laughter and warmth, only to hear polite jokes at her expense. It shattered me to see someone so kind dismissed by those who should have loved her most. Some people hide cruelty behind smiling faces and holiday lights. But the moment I saw that old photo, I remembered what real compassion looks like, and it wasn't at their table. She never used names, yet everyone knew exactly who she meant. In her circles, the post spread like wildfire, artists and friends resharing her words, tagging each other in quiet tribute. No more difficult, no more heavy. Just simple, unwavering recognition, she mattered. That same night, as I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed again, 8 new voicemails. Not from my mother, not from Blake, not even from my father, who only ever called when he needed email help. These messages were soft, full of gratitude and wonder, from strangers and allies and people I'd never met, each one offering thanks for the kindness I once offered Savannah's grandmother. I lay in the dark, the glow of the screen dancing across the ceiling, and felt something I hadn't in a long time, the quiet triumph of being seen. For the first time, my worth wasn't determined by their convenience or their convenient misery. It was measured by every life I'd touched, every hand I'd held, every soul I'd refused to abandon. And somewhere, beyond the shadows of family lore, a new celebration was already beginning, one of genuine warmth, of a sister embraced not for her sacrifice, but for her love. Savannah's voicemail echoed in my mind for days afterward. Her voice, softer, more grounded than I remembered, saying, "Hi, I'm so sorry to reach out like this. I got your number from Aunt Claire, I hope that's okay. I just needed to say something. I didn't really know who you were, but I recognized your photo. You treated my grandmother years ago. She still talks about you. She says, you changed everything. You didn't give up on her when others did. You were kind. You were present. You made her feel like she mattered. A long, trembling pause. Then, I'm sorry about what happened, and what was said about you. I had no idea. I couldn't sit there and pretend, so I left. I listened 3 times, each word carving its way into my heart until tears came, not of sorrow, but of profound gratitude. For the first time in years, I was seen. Not the heavy one, not the dutiful shadow, but the doctor, the sister, the daughter of compassion. Savannah asked for nothing more. No meeting, no repayment, no explanation. She simply bore witness to the truth of who I was, and in that acknowledgement, I found more healing than 1,000 half-hearted family apologies ever could. 3 days later, a small package arrived, an unassuming manila envelope stamped with my address in neat cursive. Inside, on thick ivory stationery, lay Savannah's handwritten letter. Dear Dr. Ellis. My grandmother still practices her gentle yoga twice a week, still buys fresh peaches at the farmer's market each Saturday, still tells everyone about the young doctor who looked her in the eye and said, "You're not done yet." Thank you, not just for saving her life, but for showing all of us what true strength looks like. The ink was smudged at the corners, as if the writer's hand trembled with emotion. I framed that letter and hung it above my desk, where each evening I finish patient notes. Every time I glance at it, I remember, my worth isn't measured by someone else's indifference. But just as I began to settle into that newfound peace, my inbox chimed with an all-too-familiar subject line, "Let's reset things." The email was signed by my mother, my father, and Blake, a united front, neatly formatted like a joint school project. They wrote of emotions running high, of regrets if any words were hurtful, and they hoped to bridge the gap with an open-hearted discussion. But in paragraph 4, their true motive surfaced. We would also appreciate it if you could reach out to Savannah and ask her to remove her post. They weren't seeking reconciliation, they were bargaining for damage control, an attempt to restore Blake's reputation at the expense of someone who had offered me genuine kindness. I didn't reply. The next morning, I received a startling call, not from my family, but from one of the hospital administrators who'd once shaken my hand at a charity fundraiser. My father had phoned him, suggesting, in hushed, worried tones, that I was emotionally unstable and might be unfit to continue caring for vulnerable patients. My breath caught in my throat. They were weaponizing my compassion, turning my very empathy into something to fear. I took a deep breath. Then I did what I'd always done when facing fear. I reminded myself of every patient I'd helped, every life I'd honored, every hand I'd held through its last tremor. I reached out to the administrator, calmly explained that recent family strife had been painful but did not affect my professional judgment or my dedication to my patients. I offered documentation, letters of support from colleagues, performance reviews, patient testimonials. Within days, the concern evaporated. My standing at the hospital remained unshaken. But it was a reminder, my family's need to control the narrative could follow me even into the workplace. That evening, I lit a single candle and poured a cup of chamomile tea. The flame flickered, casting gentle shadows on the walls. I opened my journal and wrote. Tonight, I choose myself. I choose every life I've held with care. I choose the kindness Savannah's grandmother taught me to honor. I choose the strength of my own conviction. And then I wrote a very different letter, this time, to my family. Dear Mom, Dad, Blake. I appreciate that you have reached out. But reconciliation built on silencing another's gratitude is not reconciliation. I will not ask Savannah to remove her words, nor will I return to the table where I was valued only when it suited you. I wish you well. I hope one day you understand the power of being seen. With love, Lauren. I sealed the envelope and placed it on my desk, alongside Savannah's letter, under the warm glow of the lamp. For the first time in my life, I felt the gentle rise of a promise fulfilled. That I would no longer exist as someone else's convenience, but as the woman who showed up, quietly, compassionately, for those who truly needed her. And in that choice, I discovered the truest gift of all, the freedom to be wholly, unapologetically myself. The morning after my father's call to the hospital administrator, I arrived at work expecting tension, whispers in the hallway. Instead, the administrator found me before my first patient. His eyes were apologetic, his voice hushed. "I'm so sorry," he said. "There's never been any question about your professionalism or your stability. Please, you have nothing to worry about here." In that moment, I realized the last bridge to my old life, my family's attempt to undermine me in my own workplace, had finally burned. I felt no triumph, only a quiet relief that I could continue caring for my patients without being pulled into their drama. Later that afternoon, my phone chimed with a flurry of messages in the family group chat. It was a carefully crafted litany of half-truths, no mention of the hurtful whispers in the living room, no apology for excluding me. Instead, there were statements of concern over my emotional state, and pleas for everyone to stay calm because I was tearing the family apart. 2 cousins I'd barely spoken to in years reached out privately, one sent me a voucher for a yoga retreat just in case, the other called to ask if I was getting enough fresh air. Their words trembled on the screen, dripping with pity and unasked for solutions. The final attempt came that Sunday afternoon, a soft, hesitant knock at my door. I peered through the peephole to see my parents and Blake standing on the porch, bundled against the spring chill. Their faces were lined with worry, an expression I recognized all too well, the one they wore whenever I was inconvenienced by illness or exhaustion. My heart beat unevenly as I opened the door, leaning against the frame, arms crossed. "We just want to talk," my mother said, voice gentle but urgent. I studied their faces. My father's eyes darting behind mine, Blake shifting from foot to foot. And then I realized, they hadn't come for me. They had come for the version of me who silently smoothed over every problem, the dutiful daughter who dropped everything to keep their lives on track. That version of me no longer lived here. They stood in the doorway, waiting for my invitation, hoping I'd fall back into old patterns. But I didn't move. I didn't speak. After a breath too long to count, I finally said, "No," quietly, firmly. No explanations. No recriminations. I simply closed the door. Inside, the house hummed with an unfamiliar stillness. I poured a cup of chamomile tea, the steam curling into the air like a silent benediction. At my desk, the framed letter from Savannah caught the lamp's warm glow. I held my mug in both hands and let the memory of her words wash over me. "You made her feel like she mattered." That simple truth anchored me. I thought back over the years I'd spent chasing the elusive approval of a family that measured me only against their own ideals, the golden child, the charismatic artist, the easygoing one who never asked for anything. They wanted comfort. I offered service. But I wasn't born to make people comfortable. I was born to heal, to stay when others left, to listen when others walked away, to bear witness to fragile lives until their final breath. That evening, as I filed my patient notes and shut down the computer, I felt an unfamiliar calm. My worth didn't depend on a family consensus. It wasn't a prize to be awarded or withheld. It was inherent, rooted in every life I had touched and every small kindness I'd offered without expectation. I slipped into bed, the pages of my journal open beside me. I wrote. To anyone who has ever been told they're too much, too intense, too serious, know this: you are not the problem. You never needed to shrink to fit into someone else's story. Your compassion, your commitment, your very heart are your greatest gifts. Hold them close. Protect them fiercely. And write your own story, in your own words. Before I sleep, I linger on that last line, imagining a world where each quiet act of care echoes louder than any family curse. And as I close my eyes, I carry with me the soft power of truth, for the first time, not just tolerated by silence, but celebrated by it.